Stunned to the core, I stared at him, the weight of his words slowly sinking in. Are you sure? I mean, is there even the slightest hope of a mistake? I asked. I'm sorry, I really am. I wish things were different, but I'm absolutely sure, he replied. The journey home was just terrible. How would you feel if a doctor told you your life was over? How would you tell your wife? Explain to the children? And why now? It was as if the Lord was looking at me and saying, "You've had a good life, George. Everything in it was good, and now it's time to throw in the bad. 1 minute a wonderful life, the next minute the end. It's all over. It's just not fair." My life was like a fairy tale. I was the golden boy, a top student from elementary school through college, a talented athlete who excelled in several sports. I was the quarterback of the high school team when we made it to the regional level. I made almost every play on the team and hit a home run against Jefferson, our crosstown rival, the only time our school ever beat them. I had 17 college offers. I chose state. The football coach looked at me on the first day of practice and said, "You may have been a quarterback in high school, but I see you as a receiver." I thought he was crazy, but by my early college years I was leading in receptions, yards gained, and touchdowns. I was doing everything I wanted to do. I got my first draft offer, but I decided I'd had enough of football and went to work for a company. Within 6 years, I worked my way up to vice president of marketing. But the best part was meeting Dorothy. We met in 6th grade when the boys' and girls' PE classes were combined to teach dance. Dorothy was my partner, and from that moment on our relationship began, culminating in our wedding 2 years after college. I was smitten from the moment I held Dorothy's hand in the gym, so much so that for the next year my classmates and friends teased me endlessly. "George has a crush on Dorothy." And bride and groom. That's what I heard, probably every day. Unfortunately, Dorothy didn't feel the same way. She liked me, but she liked lots of other boys too. When her parents allowed her to date, I was just one of many. Things changed a bit when I got into sport. The more successful I became, the more popular I became. There's always a group of girls at school who like sportsmen and like to be seen with sportsmen. When those girls started to take an interest in me, so did Dorothy. In college, one of her friends told me that Dorothy thought I'd end up with her when she was done having fun. But when other girls started noticing me, Dot decided it was better to play it safe before others could swoop in and make her forget. We started going out regularly and were a couple for almost all of high school. I say almost because, like all teenagers, we occasionally fought and broke up, only to get back together a week or two later. The main issue was intimacy, or rather the lack of it. Every boy in my class bragged about becoming a man. I used to hear things like, "I was with Becky in the car park last night," or, "Did you hear about Nancy? She and 3 guys." All I got from Dorothy was a few kisses. When I tried to put my arm around her, she slapped me and said, "If you want a woman, call Sally Murphy," and then didn't speak to me for a week. The third time it happened, I called Sally, but it only made things worse. Firstly, if Sally was available, she'd take the nights off when she was with me. Secondly, Dorothy didn't speak to me for a month after she found out I'd gone out with Sally. When we finally spoke, we broke up for good. "How could you do this to me?" "It was your idea. You suggested I call Sally." "But that's not what I meant. All I know is that I'm sick of being the only guy in high school." "Okay, George. I'm sorry, but I value my chastity. I promised my mother I'd be a virgin on my wedding night, and I intend to keep that promise." "Well then, I guess we're done." "What? Why do you say that?" "You've already said you won't get married until you finish college, and that's not for another 5 years. I'm not that attached to my... Damn it. I'm definitely not going to wait another 5 years to get rid of it." "Then I guess we have nothing more to talk about," she said, getting up and walking away. I thought, well, fine. If that's what you want, then so be it. A month later there was the school dance, and I invited Nancy Bickford. Dorothy went to the prom with Sammy Vane, and although I tried to ignore them both, every time I looked in their direction I saw Dorothy looking at me. After the ball I asked Nancy where she was going, and she replied, "Some motel." "I hope you were planning to spend the night with me tonight, weren't you?" Who could argue? Nancy laughed until she cried when she found out I was still a virgin. You'll be my first, so we'll do it my way. What does that mean? I'll tell you what to do. That's how it usually works. It was both good and bad. Good because she told all the girls that I had done it, and I became very popular. Bad because one of the girls who heard it was Dorothy. Nancy and I dated for about a month, and then she started dating a guy from college and dumped me. No sooner had Nancy disappeared than Sarah asked me out on a date to a family event, and I ended up in her bed that night. She had already told everyone that Nancy wasn't lying. A week later, Sammy Vane started bragging that he had been with Dorothy. After Sarah, there was Betsy, Bob and Cindy, and I heard that John, Bill and Mike had been with Dorothy. It seemed like she was showing me that she would do it every time. Once, just before graduation, I was sitting in a booth at the soda shop when Dorothy slid into the seat across from me. How have you been? Fine. You don't call me anymore. I've got nothing to say, George. Don't be like that. Don't feed me lines. You lied to me, and then you got up and walked away from me the last time we talked. I didn't lie. I never lied to you. Really? How about, I'll be a virgin on our wedding night and I won't get married until I've finished college? Now you tell me that wasn't a lie. You're not married, but you're certainly not a virgin, and you haven't even started college, let alone finished it. You're telling me that Sammy, John, Bill and Mike weren't just for fun? And I noticed that you had absolutely no problem giving Sammy what you never even thought of giving me. Like I said, I have no reason to call you because we have nothing to talk about. The summer between high school and college was very stressful for me. I was working 2 part-time jobs, trying to pay off my car and have some pocket money for when I started school. I still managed to go out on dates 2 or 3 times a week. Most of my dates were with girls who wanted to see for themselves if what Nancy, Sarah and a few other girls had said was true. I didn't see Dorothy at all that summer, but I heard she had quite a few boyfriends. In the autumn I went to college and life got even more complicated. I still had a part-time job. I had 16 academic hours at college and I continued to play football. Enough girls from my old high school went to state, so I still had a somewhat interesting life. But with work, academics and football training, 1 evening a week and 1 day at the weekend, that was the best I could afford. It was little, but it was still a lot more than some people got. Although Dorothy was supposed to be at state, I didn't see her or hear anything about her or what she was doing. I was curious, but I didn't want to ask. The last thing I wanted was for someone to say to I saw George yesterday and he asked about you. As it turned out, I had nothing to worry about. Family problems prevented her from starting the autumn term. At the beginning of the spring term, I only saw her once or twice, and then one day as I was leaving class, I found her waiting for me in the hallway. Can we talk? About what? About us. There is no us anymore. Not since the day you said we had nothing more to talk about and then got up and left. And if I remember correctly, what we talked about then was a promise you were supposed to keep for the next 5 years. The very promise you reneged on less than 3 months later to Sammy Vane. I did it to hurt you, George. Not because I liked Sammy very much. It hurt like hell when you didn't ask me to the prom, and it killed me to find out about you and Nancy, what you were up to. It killed me, George. You were supposed to be mine. But I bit my lip and put up with it because I expected you to come back to me after you got rid of your bugs and finished with Nancy. Then you moved on to Sarah and I got angry and said, okay, I'll show him, and went on a date with Sammy. After that, every time you met a new girl, I met a new guy just to get back at you. Why did you do all this? Can we stop throwing stones at each other, Georgie? Can't we try and be together again? I really didn't know how to respond. I missed her. I still thought about her almost all the time. She was still the most beautiful girl I'd ever been with, but I still didn't know. She waited for me to answer, and when I remained silent she said, why can't you answer me, Georgie? Is it because Sammy got what you didn't? Well, let me tell you, dear, you just won. It was different for me, just as it was for Sammy. If we're being honest, it hurt like hell, and I punched him so hard in the chest to make him stop that he was bruised for a week afterwards. And then there's the fact that I didn't really enjoy it. Then why did you keep doing it? To see if I could make you angry. You kept seeing Sammy, John, Bill, and Mike even though you didn't like them. No, I just didn't like Sammy. The others were all right. So you like making love? It was all right with Mike. It was all right with John, Bill, and a few others, but Sammy was a total disappointment. It was like, 1, 2, I'll call you tomorrow. So what do you think is going to happen with us? I've got a flat off campus and I want you to move in with me. Where did you get the money for a flat? My grandmother died and left me a lot of money. That's why I didn't start the spring semester. I had to take care of some family business. Would you like to live with me? Yes, and if you say yes, I'll do everything I can to make up for lost time. And she did. And she did her best to make up for lost time. For the past 14 years, this woman has spoiled me rotten. She catered to my every whim, my desires were law to her. And so our life was incredible. Even after living together for 4 years and getting married 14 years ago, we still made love 5 or 6 times a week. Having 4 children in the house didn't stop us. Life was good, and now this. I couldn't face Dot. When I came home, one look at my face and she would know something was wrong. To avoid that, I told her I had problems at work and would be home in the morning. Then I went into the room, closed the door, sat down at the table and stared at the wall. After an hour or 2 of trying to figure out what the doctor had told me and feeling sorry for myself, I finally broke out of the cycle. I wasn't a coward, never was and never wanted to be. I got out the yellow pages and started looking for doctors. I made a list of about half a dozen and put it in my briefcase. I wanted a second, third, fourth, and maybe even a 12th opinion. One opinion wasn't enough for me. The list was compiled and it was time to decide what to do next. I left the room and went to find Dot. If the doctor was right, I wouldn't have much choice. She was in the kitchen doing the dishes and I grabbed her hand and said, "Woman, I have needs," and dragged her into the bedroom. 2 weeks later the jury trial was called. 5 different doctors had told me the same thing. It was impossible to deny it any longer. I couldn't hide from it, I couldn't run away. The only thing I could do was face it, sit down with Dorothy and tell her. That was the most difficult part of the plan. We were good together. We were a perfect match, like hand and glove. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. Everyone said they wanted to be just like us. I took a day off to talk to Dot while the children were at school. I didn't want them to interrupt us. It's hard not to be distracted when Alice comes into the room and says, "Mummy, Josh hit me," or when Mary says, "Mummy, can you help me dress my doll?" Or when Kevin wants me to show him how to lace up his baseball glove. I couldn't find the words. I sat there looking at the woman who made my soul sing and I couldn't bring myself to say a word. "What is it, Georgie? What's all this about? Come on, George, what's so important that you had to stay home to talk to me?" It was hard, but I finally took a deep breath. 2 weeks ago a doctor gave me very bad news. I didn't believe him, so I went to another doctor for a second opinion. I didn't believe him either, but after 3 more doctors did tests, I have to accept the facts. I have to accept the facts. I can't deny it and think it will go away because it won't. It's there, it's malignant and it's killing me. Oh my God, George, what is it? Some terrible disease. It's like Dorothy, but what I have is worse. What I have is infinitely worse because it's eating away at my soul. When I went for my annual checkup, they found a shadow on my body. They did a bunch of tests and when they came back, the doctor, who knew about my sporting past, said, "It must be hard not to have a son to follow in my footsteps." I asked him what he meant and he told me I couldn't have children. I didn't believe it. How could I not have children with 4 children in the house? I checked with 4 other doctors and they all said the same thing. Also, when I had the children vaccinated against the flu, I had DNA tests done. According to the DNA tests, the children have 4 different fathers and none of them is me. Any comments, Dorothy? Also, I'd like to add that every 13th man is raising someone else's child, according to sociologists analyzing anonymous DNA test results.